Hello and welcome to this complete, in-depth tutorial on dDo and its features. I will be showing you how I created a texture for the Remington chainsaw in just a couple of hours. At the resolution of 4K, and with the amount of details the texture ended up with, this is something that would have taken me closer to 40 hours without the use of dDo. I'll be working in real time and create 4K textures from scratch using only dDo. And since the resolution is quite high, I'll be working in half resolution. I'll then show dDo's production render feature for scaling up to full 4K resolution at any time. In this tutorial, we'll go over base and color baking, painting details with Endo 2, creating a quick base texture using the automation hub, detailing and defining materials, designing custom paintwear using the custom detail creator, and production wrap-up. In this part, we'll go over baking for dDo, and we'll be focusing on basic baking in XNormal and how to bake a color map in Maya. Okay, so I have my high poly and I have my low poly. So the next thing we're gonna do is create the maps required to work with dDo. And the program we're going to use to generate the maps is called XNormal, which is a free tool and it's really amazing. So I really recommend you getting it. So the first thing we need to do in XNormal to proceed is to add a high poly mesh, which is here under high definition meshes. So what I do is I just right click, choose add meshes, and I browse to my high poly mesh, which is here, high.obj. And the only thing I need to change here is the scale of the mesh, seeing as I modeled it quite small. So to avoid any rendering errors, I'm just going to increase it to 10. And the next step is to add a low poly mesh under low definition meshes. So right click, add meshes, choose low poly. And same thing here, to match it up with a high poly, I need to increase the mesh scale to 10. Next, we just go into baking options, which is here. And the first thing you're gonna see is probably the output file. This is where you want to save your maps. And the way it works is you type in, for example, in this case, Remington. If you bake a normal map, it's gonna add dash normal. If you check image occlusion, it's gonna add dash occlusion. So I'm gonna save it on my desktop, like so. Just call it Remington.tga, and I want the resolution to be 4K, 1496. Next, I'm gonna check normal map. This is where all the different maps you can bake are located, and you can check as many of them as you want, and it's just gonna batch them out one after the other. So I'm gonna check normal map. Go into options, make sure tangent space is enabled, and you want all of these to be positive. Positive Y, positive X, positive Z. And I want the anti-aliasing to be 4 times. And that's all you need to do. Then just click, actually I'm gonna save it as Remington Bakes, just to be clear. So next, just click generate maps. Alright, so there we go. And in case you didn't see the progress in real time, it might be because you have do not notify tile updates enabled. So if you want to see the progress, just switch to notify tile updates. So the next map I want to bake is an object space normal map. So in order to do that, I just go into the options for normal map, and I disable tangent space, which means it's gonna bake an object space instead. So this is basically just a toggle. So uncheck, go out, and seeing as XNormal saves, adds the suffix by itself, I need to add -os in order to prevent it from prompting me if I want to overwrite the previous normal bake. Almost all the maps here can be automatically plugged into dDo using the quick load function by using the naming conventions. So I added -os and I'm gonna generate map. There we go. And last but not least, we need to bake an ambient occlusion. I'm just gonna use the default settings, seeing as it works just fine for me. So I'm gonna remove the -os, seeing as there's nothing to overwrite, and I'm gonna reduce it to 1 in anti-aliasing. And there we go. Right, so that's all we need to bake in Next Normal. Let's go to Maya and bake the color map. Okay, so to create the color map, I first need to load the FBX file containing the swatches, which will be used to specify the material groups. If you right-click on your dDo shortcut, open File Path, go back to the Quixel, dDo, and Swatches folder. You'll find an FBX file and an ASE file. Just drag drop the FBX file into Maya, or your program of choice, and drop it. You'll get all of these spheres containing, all having a specific material applied, such as leather, marble, and so on. So to bake this, first I need to apply these materials to my mesh. So what I'm gonna do first is just select the main part of the model, right click and assign existing material. And I'm gonna assign metal painted, like that. And next I'll select all these bolts and screws, and I want them to be iron. So I'm gonna go into metal, iron. And you can also go into face mode and just apply a certain material to some parts. For example here, I'm gonna select this little surface here. If I can just select it, I'm gonna increase the selection. It'll grow the selection. And I want this to be, let's see, rubber. There we go. And I want this part here to be, no, I mean this part here. Let's see, let's select this ring here. I want this to be some sort of galvanized steel or something. Just right click, existing material, metal, galvanized. There we go. And this should be, let's see, iron as well. I'm trying to limit the amount of materials I use because it's just simpler to have fewer material groups. But I'll try and separate the materials as good as possible. And this part here, I want to be, let's see, I want this to be plastic rough. And this grip up here should be leather. Just find it in the list here. Let's see. Yeah, just go into my hypergraph, find it here instead. There we go. So just keep adding materials And I'll keep adding, and I'll when I see you again, I'm gonna show you how to bake them out to your low poly. Okay, so there we go. I've applied all the materials I need, and I think I got some pretty cool material separation. I got some different plastics down here and different metals meeting, like chrome and iron and so on. So I'm ready to bake, and to do that in Maya, you go to rendering up here, lighting, shading, and then transfer maps. And I'll just select the high poly and combine it all to one mesh. There we go. And I'll input this in source meshes, since it's going to be reading from the high poly. So I'm add selected, and I need to find my low poly. Display, show all. Select the low poly and combine to one mesh and add selected as target. There we go. Right, so the output map needs to be diffuse, just a flat diffuse, not shaded. So just click diffuse, specify where you want to save it. I'm just gonna save it for desktop, to my desktop, for make it easier. And I'm gonna name it Remington Color TGA. I'm gonna go into Maya common output, and it's already set to 4K, and you can set this to whatever you want, and you can change the sampling quality, filter type, and so on. I'm just gonna leave it as is. Feel free to use the same settings as I use. And that's it. Just click bake and close, or bake, and I'll see you when it's done. Okay, so now that this is done, I'm gonna apply it and see how it looks. So I'm gonna assign a new material. I'm gonna make it a Lambert just for this. Apply it in color slot. I'll just browse to it. Desktop, Remington Color. And there we go. Just gonna do some cleanup here in Photoshop before we move on to dDo. But it's pretty good otherwise. So I'll see you soon. In this part we'll go over detailing with Endo 2, and we'll go over text to normal, shape to normal, selection to normal, sculpting, and zipping. Alright, so before we can move into dDo, it's time to add some more details to the normal map in using Endo 2. So as you can see, I have already loaded Endo 2, and in the background we have the baked normal map with no additions made whatsoever. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go into mix and convert my normal to Endo 2 normal. Like so. As you can see, the layer structure got changed, allowing us to work with Endo 2 properly. And what I want to do now is I want to load the actual mesh for the chainsaw, which you do by just right-clicking on the previewer mesh and clicking this load custom mesh icon here. And there we go. So as you can see, we have some details here, like the screws and the coil and so on. So the first thing I want to do is I want to add some sort of segmentation here to the handle or the grip, like up here, wrapping around to the back, and across the back here up to the I'm not sure what it's called, and then going up around here, wrapping around down here down to the trigger. Right, so I'm gonna create a new layer and select the brush tool, zoom down here. Just gonna move this a bit out of the way, and this size should be good. Make sure you use a white color when you're making these shapes. So I'm gonna start here, and I'm holding down Shift, which allows me to just click, and I'll get a line to where I click. Something like this. Up around here, up to the back. And from here it's just a straight line all the way up there. There we go. Just holding Shift. And it's gonna continue back here. Just hold down Shift when you draw. Something like that. And just keep holding Shift, drag it to the right there. And this is the tricky part because here's an UV distortion. But I'm gonna try and see if I can get it on the first try. Down here. Keep going down. And down here to the bottom part of the grip. And just straight down to the trigger. There we go. Alright, so now that we're done, I'm gonna click Convert Brush to Normal, which is the icons you see here. Click it, and there we go. As you can see, it goes outwards instead of inwards, as you can see on the previewer, which is not what we want. I want it to go downwards to make it look like it's been segmented, like it's two different parts. So I'm gonna change the slant to down, and as you can see, there's some jaggies here. So I'm just gonna enable anti-aliasing. There we go, much smoother. Yep, and it works pretty well over here, even though there's some distortion. And I'm gonna add a slight softness to it, and also decrease the contrast a bit. There we go. Yep, and as you can see, the normal we just did, or detail we just did, doesn't quite follow the underlying shape. So I'm gonna show it on the map as well. It's just on top of it. So I'm gonna change the blending mode here from normal to overlay. And as you can see, it changed to follow the underlying shapes a bit more. You can see it on the previewer as well. So before I'm moving on, I want to zip the layer, which is this button here. And what this does, it basically just zips up the layer, decreasing the file size and improving the performance of Photoshop and Endo 2. And you can at any time just unzip it to continue working on it. So zip, and there we go. And as you can see, if you click it again, it gets unzipped. So zip. There we go. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is I want to add the company logo here to this small circle, which is located here. And I wasn't able to find a proper bitmap or a company logo, but from what I've gathered, it's usually just a thin sans font face, and the company's name is Remington. And I think this font does a pretty good job. The logo is actually different in every place I've seen. There we go. And I'm gonna convert text to normal. And I'm gonna use the outer bevel mode. Change the blending mode to overlay and try out some sort of softness and decrease the contrast a bit. There we go. Yeah, as you can see, it's a bit slanted to the left. So I'm gonna compensate by rotating it to the right. And a really cool thing about Endo 2 normals is that you can rotate and it's gonna update in real time. And let's refresh and see if it's better. No, just a bit more. Teeny weeny bit more. Refresh. And that's good enough. So the next thing I want to do is I want to use the marquee tool, the polygonal marquee tool, sorry. and just create some sort of underline here. Something like so. Yep. And I'm gonna fill it with a white color. Actually, I don't even have to fill it. I can just go into 2 here, and it's gonna ask me if I want to convert the selection to normal. So yeah, that's what I want to do. Yes, and I'm gonna change to outer once again. Increase the softness to 2 or 3. Change the blending mode to an overlay, and decrease the contrast to make it pop a bit less. And there we go. I can't zoom in more because it's a really wide model, but it looks good from here. And it looks good on the map as well. And next thing I want to add is I'm not sure what it's called really, like a stamp where a sticker is gonna go on this side here. On this tank or lid or what it is. So I'm gonna use the same technique as before. I'm gonna use the polygonal selection marquee tool. And I'm gonna make a shape, something like this. Just straight down. And somewhere around there. There's some UV stretching here as well. But I'm gonna try my best to compensate for it. And I'm gonna convert it and see what it looks like. Yep, that's fine. I'm just gonna change the slant to down. Change the bevel mode to stroke emboss. Decrease the depth. A bit more. There we go. And change the blending mode to overlay. Increase the softness quite a bit to make it look more stamped. I'm gonna zoom in so you can see a bit better. This is without smoothing or softness, and this is with. It looks a bit more like it's been stamped into metal. I'm also gonna enable anti-aliasing. So that looks pretty cool. And I'm noticing a little bit of distortion here. So to fix that, I'm gonna go into sculpt mode, which is up here. And this allows me to modify the normal or the detail by deleting or adding shapes. So I'm gonna select this bottom part here and delete. As you can see, it's updated. So when I go out of sculpt mode, it's gonna become a proper normal as well. Again, and there we go. There's actually a slight distortion up here as well. So I'm gonna go back in sculpt mode and somewhere around there, like so. Oops. Sorry. There we go. Yes, and go out of sculpt mode. There we go. Much better. Okay, so now there's just a couple of more things I want to add. First of all, this part here, where we just worked, is supposed to be some sort of lid or hatch to the parts below. So I want to add some sort of segmentation here as well, like around this blocky shape from here all the way around, following here up there or something like that. So I'm gonna zoom out and get this previewer out of the way, and I'm gonna try and find the part in the texture, which is here. This is where the blade goes in. This goes all the way around the top here, yep, and down here. So I'm gonna use the path tool or the pen tool to create smooth, nice lines. Go back. There. It's a really good way to compensate for the UV distortion, allowing you to make those very smooth bends. Oops. Yep. And continue working on this one. And I'm gonna go back and edit these a bit later, once I'm done. And there. I'm gonna change it to so it doesn't have a fill, and make a white stroke. I'm gonna use a freeform pen tool to move these around a bit. This one is a bit too far to the right, and this one is a bit too far to the left. This is a bad part about not making straight areas straight in the UV. There's always going to be some distortion, and it's really difficult to work with. That was my bad. And this is a bit too far to the left. There we go. So now the tool asked me if I want to convert the shape to a normal, which is what I want to do. And as you can see, it's quite jaggy. So again, I'm gonna enable anti-aliasing to get rid of the worst. And it looks pretty good. There's no apparent distortion here. I'm gonna change the bevel mode to outer to make it a bit wider. And I'm also gonna change the slant to down once again. And that looks pretty cool. I'm gonna try and change the size to 2 or maybe even... Yeah, there we go. That's really good. All right. And seeing as there's quite a bit of shapes going on here, especially over here, I need to change the blending mode once again to overlay. There we go. You can play around with these and see if you get a better result using a different one. That looks pretty cool. Hard light. Gonna increase the softness to around 2 once again. Yep, that's perfect. And I'm also gonna move the entire group a bit to the right, so that I can better connect from here down to the, let me show you, over here, where the blade goes in. Gonna refresh. Yep, that's gonna work. Right, so I'm gonna make a new layer once again, and use a brush tool, and make a line somewhere around there, and convert it. Change the bevel mode to outer, slant it down, and let's see if they connect. Nope, they do not. So I'm gonna rotate it a bit, because there's a bit of offset. Yep, that's better. It's not perfect. And I'm also gonna increase the depth to 3, add some softness, and anti-aliasing. Yeah, it's gonna be good enough for now. Gonna go back and fine tweak it later. And I'm gonna do the same thing over here. Just gonna make a new layer. Make a line. And convert it. Change the slant. Increase the size to 3. Anti-aliasing and some softness. That's pretty good. I'm gonna go back and fine tweak them later. Perfect. Alright, so the final detail I want to add is to make this handle or wrap up here look like leather wraps. And the approach is going to be really simple. It's basically just going to be lines over, let's see where it is. Yeah, it's over here. There. Just going to make lines, make a new layer, make some lines using a soft brush, pretty wide. Like so. Make a line. Actually, it's a bit too wide, I think. Like so. Duplicate it, drag it down, merge, duplicate, drag, drag down, sorry. Merge, duplicate, and drag down. Pretty evenly spaced. And I'm gonna use the distort function to drag it down, drag it up. They're not gonna meet up perfectly at the seam, but the seam is pretty well hidden, so I'm not too bothered about it. It's not gonna be visible from the first person view, which is over here. And the seam is somewhere, yeah, you can see the seam here. So I'm not too bothered about it. I'm just gonna make it look like it's actually wrapping around without not actually doing so. So now that I have those shapes, I'm gonna convert to a normal. Change the slant to down, as usual. And increase the softness. Add some anti-aliasing. And as you can see, it already looks kind of like wraps. I'm gonna try and change the bevel mode to outer. Stroke emboss, and increase the size to 6. It's a bit too much, so I'm gonna drag it down to 4. Increase the softness again. There we go. And decrease the opacity. And change the blending mode to overlay. So it already looks pretty good, although I want to add some more definition to it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a new layer once again. Use a small brush, smaller than we used before. And on either side of these indentations, I'm gonna add lines like this. And now I'm noticing my Photoshop is getting sluggish, so I'm gonna go back and zip, as I showed you before. Just go over the normal groups and zip. This one is already zipped. This one is zipped. And zip this one as well. Alright, so go back into my layer and continue adding these strokes. They're not perfect, but it's a leather wrap, so they don't need to be perfect. It's an organic shape. It's been used and worn. And there we go. So I'm gonna convert. and enable anti-aliasing since they're diagonal. Increase the softness quite a bit to around 4 or 3. And I'm gonna change to overlay blending mode. And decrease the opacity quite dramatically to around 30. There we go. Just a very subtle difference here. Barely noticeable, but it's still definition. Alright, so what I'm gonna do next is I'm going to create a new layer and basically just gonna use a soft brush here. I'm gonna add a stroke here between the like on the wrappings to make them look a bit more bulgy. And I'm not too worried about moving into other UV islands because I can always go back and sculpt, which I'm gonna show you later. So now that we have these, I'm gonna convert. Change the blend to overlay. Make it quite soft. Like so. Decrease the depth. Decrease the contrast a bit. And decrease the opacity. So as you can see, we're getting quite nice bulges here. If you look at the highlights. Looks really cool. So I'm gonna go now, as you can see, I'm moving like slightly inside this UV island over here. So I'm gonna go into sculpt mode and use the eraser tool. Use a hard brush and just delete. Like so. And once I go out of sculpt mode, it's gonna convert to a normal map. There we go. And I think that's everything we need to add. So next time I see you, we're gonna go into dDo and do some texturing. In this part, we'll go over the automation hub. And we'll focus on map inputs, environment and material presets, and work resolution. Alright, so here we are in dDo. So when you first start dDo, this is what you're gonna see. And this is the automation hub. And this contains all the features you need to get started with a new project. So let's get started up here. These squares up here, these are the input slots. We can plug in normal, color, AO, object space, low poly mesh, cavity, height, diffuse, specular, and gloss. When texturing real-time assets, the normal map is all dDo needs to create wear and tear. It is recommended, however, to also plug in more maps such as AO. So AO, or ambient occlusion, which besides being baked into diffuse and specular, will also enable useful control over how details accumulate. If no AO is plugged in, it will automatically be generated from a normal map. And for even more advanced control, use object space maps. The object space normal map, it lets you filter the direction of the details you create, and this will let you simulate really cool effects such as dust only being gathered at the top of something, or like mud spatter coming in from below on a car or a truck or something. You can create some really cool dynamic effects on your models. So the color. The color map is used to generate material definition groups, which basically work as masks, allowing you to place details just within that area, allowing you to define really believable materials. The low poly, this is where you specify which mesh you want to preview the texture on. Cavity uses a cavity map or dDo uses a cavity map to generate its wear and tear, and this map is automatically generated from the normal you plug in. However, you can override it by plugging in your own cavity map. And cavity map are essential when working with high poly texturing, or when working with a pure low poly that doesn't have normal maps. If you load a custom diffuse, specular, or gloss map, these will override any base colors otherwise extracted from the color map. Individually masked material groups will still be created, letting you add material-specific details. I'm gonna be going more in detail on the material groups I'm talking about all the time. So the next thing you see here is the environmental detail preset and material definition preset. The environmental presets are presets that contain details that are applied all across the entire texture, while the material definition presets, these contain details that are just applied on certain parts of your texture, and those parts of the texture, those are defined by your color map. dDo creates groups or masks based on the color map. Start off by loading the input maps we're gonna use. So I'm gonna press quick load, which allows me to plug in several maps automatically by following a common sense naming convention. dDo supports most of them. In this example, I spell out the map names for suffixes for extra clarity, but abbreviated suffixes work as well. You can also just load them by selecting them manually. Like so, and just the object space. So next I'm gonna be choosing the environmental preset, which is the details that are applied all over the entire texture. So as you can see here, we have a whole bunch of different environment presets, like heavy acids, dry dirts, generic dust, or standard dirts, and so on. I'm gonna be starting off with the peeled paint metal. I feel that's pretty appropriate for my mesh. Next, I'm gonna be specifying the material definition preset. And for this, I'm gonna be using the standard reflectance palette, seeing as I used the swatches in Maya to generate my color map. So where I specified painted metal, I'm gonna get the painted metal reflectance values in color. So I'm using this. Next, we have the detail size. You can choose between normal, doubled, tripled, or quadrupled. And this is a scale of the details that are inside of these presets. And related to that, we have the work res. Here you can choose which resolution you want to work in. If you want to work in a quarter of your resolution, a third, or half, or full. And this resolution can be changed at any time when you're working. So you can upsize from 1K to a 4K whenever you want. I'm gonna be working in half size, so I'm gonna be demonstrating the scale up later. Next, you can swap colors or not. Basically, this enables you to swap the colors that you specified in your color map for the colors of the preset you loaded. I'm gonna check this because I want to get the colors from the preset. Material details. This enables you to choose if you want or do not want to get the details inside the preset you load. Custom layers. This is layers that dDo adds in which you can add your manual details, like paint a decal or just whatever you want. I'm gonna disable this, seeing as I'm not gonna do that. And last, well, not last, almost last, but we have match materials by. Here we have three different options. The first one, weight. Depending on how many pixels a certain color takes up on the document, it will be assigned the corresponding material. Next we have color, which indeed will assign the corresponding material depending on the colors you specified. This is good if you're using set colors for different surfaces in your project. For example, all metal surfaces are blue and all rubber surfaces are yellow, so you're gonna get a predictable result. Next, brightness is pretty much the same as color, except that it reads from a grayscale, from black to white. For this, I'm gonna be using color, so I get exactly what I want from the preset. And lastly, we have the checkboxes for which maps you want dDo to generate. I do recommend you enabling all of these, seeing as it's going to be needed for most projects. Next, I'm going to press generate, and I'll see you soon. Now we'll be taking a closer look at adding details and defining materials by looking into things like the detail browser, adding and tweaking details, quick reflectance values, and the previewer. Alright, so here we go. Here's our render project. And as you can see, it looks kind of bland and very colorful. So, as you can see, the automation hub is gone, and instead we have this interface. And this is the main dDo window. And I'm gonna be going over the different elements here to start with. So, to the top left here we have the diffuse, specular, gloss, height, and normal toggles. And by clicking these, you can preview the different maps. Like so. And if you double click the dDo logo, you're gonna minimize all the dDo related windows. Below it we have 3 tabs. The first tab, Maps, is the export window where you can export your maps. You can choose format, output path, if you want to export all selected, the AO and cavity map, opacities, and so on. I'm going to be going more into detail on this later once I'm done with the map. Here, under the environmental tab, you can see the different detail groups, preset loading, saving new groups, and so on. And the details you apply in the environmental tab, these are applied all across the entire texture. While in the material tab, these details are applied only in the specified material group that you have selected. But let's go back to the environmental tab. And as you can see, we have some details already applied, such as these edge chips and some edge grime and so on. And this is because we loaded a preset which was called which is called peeled paint metal, which you can see here by clicking this. And you can at any time save your current preset with the changes you have made, or load more presets, which is what I'm gonna do right now. So I just click load preset, and I get the preset browser here. And what I want to do is I want to add some dust to make it look a bit old and worn. So I'm just browsing through the preset browser here. Alright, I think I'm gonna go with the generic dust. See what that looks like. And you can also choose which size of the detail. Normal, doubled, tripled, quadrupled. Just like when you load it in the automation hub. And you can also sort the presets by category, like so. But yeah, I'm gonna go with the generic dust, normal size, and apply it. So now it's gonna add an additional group containing the details from the preset. There we go. And it's quite a bit over the top. So I'm gonna be showing you the next part here, which is the detail group controls. So you can change the opacity values for all the maps by holding down shift and dragging, or you can tweak each map opacity by individually by just dragging normally. I'm gonna drag this down to around 25%. I can toggle on and off, see what it looks like. I'm gonna go into specular, see what it looks like here. I'm gonna drag it down to 25 as well. And around 5% in height because I don't want very much height information from the dusts. And the glass, that's fine. So looking here, I can see it's looking a bit cloudy. So I'm gonna try and locate the detail responsible for that. I think it's a random blobs. Yep. So I'm gonna reduce this to around 15, just get a very subtle effect, like so. And now I'm seeing that we have some extreme edge wear or edge chips here. So I'm gonna go back into the first group we got from the preset from the automation hub. And I'm gonna toggle on and off the edge chips. I'm noticing that's not the one. I'm gonna see if there's a different one. That one? Yes, perfect. So I'm gonna hold down Shift and drag these down to around 20% or 15%. Like so. And now I want to preview this, see what it looks like. And to do that, I just click this previewer button here in the bottom left. Bottom right, I mean. And as you can see, we have the default preview cube. This is because I didn't specify the mesh in the automation hub. So in order to load our own mesh, we just press space, which is going to bring up the menu. You also get a tooltip here saying press tab for info. So by pressing that, you can see a whole lot of different hotkeys. For example, you can toggle diffuse, specular, gloss, and normal. And you can also toggle a turntable by pressing R. Toggle on and off the cylinder floor. And you can also take a screenshot by pressing P. So I'm going to disable the floor. I'm going to remove the tooltips. And I'm going to load my mesh. And there we go. I'm also gonna remove the normal map preview, pressing 4 again. There we go. So the color for the painted metal is looking pretty cool already, but I want to add some more environmental details here before we move on to defining the different materials. So I'm gonna hide the menu and move this out of the way so we can get a better view at the texture. So now I want to make a new custom detail group. So I'm just pressing new group here, which adds an empty group, and I'm gonna name it directional. And now I just click add detail, and I'm gonna browse to a dust detail. Try the general dirt, see what it looks like by pressing preview down here. And while previewing, you have two different options. You can either preview it directly on the map, or you can preview on the alpha. I'm just gonna change the crop size or preview size, and I'm gonna show you what it looks like when you're previewing it. When you preview it on alpha, there we go. It's a bit easier to see what's going on, but it's a bit difficult to see exactly where it's applied and how it's gonna look like on the map. But I prefer to use alpha first and then move on to on map once I found a detail I like. I'm gonna keep looking through the different dusts we have. I'm gonna sort it by particles and dust. The crevice dust. I'm gonna change it to everywhere. Yes, this is gonna work really well. I'm gonna set it to everywhere. And I'm gonna enable object space, OBJ SPC. And if you remember, I plugged in an object space normal map before, and this allows me to specify in which angle of the model I want to apply the detail. So I'm gonna check this box, and by default it ends up on positive Y, which is from the top. This is from the bottom, and the sides, front and back. So positive Y. I'm gonna make it preview a bigger part of the texture. There we go. I'm gonna increase the level of it a bit, see if I can get some cool effects. Looking really cool. Drag it down a bit more. And I'm also gonna try and change to on edges instead of everywhere. See what happens. No, I like everywhere more. And I'm gonna apply it. And now it's saving out so I can preview it. Looks really cool. I'm gonna disable the auto refresh, and I'm gonna drag down the height information because it's a bit too extreme for my taste, to around 15%. And I'm gonna change the color a bit so it pops out a bit more. I want it to be a bit brighter. So I click the swatch here next to D, which stands for diffuse. Something like this. So as you can see, it has some really cool dynamics to the model. So I'm gonna preview this, see what it looks like, by just pressing the refresh button up here. There we go. Looking really cool. It's looking really worn, like sun bleached. Speaking of which, I'm gonna apply a miscoloration detail as well, using the object space feature. So I'm changing to show all, and I'm gonna search for miscoloration, which is here. I'm gonna preview it, and I'm gonna change the crop size to this area down here. And I'm gonna increase the scale dramatically, and the level, and enable OBJ SPC. So as you can see, we're getting almost a flat color on all upwards facing faces. So I'm gonna apply it. Close this down, and as you can see, it's there. I'm gonna move it below the big dust because I want the miscoloration to be beneath the dust, seeing as miscoloration is a consistent effect, and dust is something that's more dynamic and can be applied after it's been miscolored by sun. So I'm gonna click here where the hand icon is, drag it on top of the miscoloration, just let it load. There we go. So I'm gonna change the color of this to, I think, some sort of bright reddish color. Something like this. It's awesome. I'm gonna reduce the opacity to around 50% and remove the height information altogether, because sun bleach won't add to the details. I'm gonna refresh. There we go. Very subtle difference, but I really like it. It's all in the small details, if you ask me. I'm gonna bring up the options again, and I'm gonna increase the brightness of the lights a bit, and also max out the diffuse and gloss values. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with the environment details. I'm gonna change the edge chip a bit, mainly the speck and gloss values. Let's zoom in down here. There we go. I'm gonna make these a bit brighter. Increase the specular value. And decrease the gloss value. So we get a wider highlight. And I'm gonna refresh again. There we go. So as you can see, we got a lot more specularity from these. Looking really awesome. So now that the environment is a lot more acceptable, I'm gonna be going into the material tab. And the material tab works very similarly to the environmental tab, in the sense that you can add details and so on. But as I said before, the details are only applied in the selected detail group, material group. If you hover over these different areas on the color map, and this is the color map you specified in the automation hub, you can see here it says painted metal, plate, rubber, rough plastic, just like we specified in Maya. So I'm gonna select the painted metal, which is the main material of this model, and the color, it looks a bit pale. So I'm gonna click the swatch here next to D, make it a bit more saturated and a bit darker as well, and press OK. Just wait for it to save and preview. And there we go. And the gloss is a bit too high, so I'm gonna lower it. There we go. And the speck is a bit too bright as well, if you ask me. So I'm gonna lower it as well. There we go. Okay, so for this material, I want this to be look like really rough, heavy-duty painted metal. So I want it to look a bit lumpy, like dotty, kind of hard to explain, but I'm gonna go into add material detail. I'm gonna clear the search query. And there's a detail that I really like for this kind of material, which is called, let's see if I can find it, mud rain. So I'm gonna click that, preview, and I'm gonna change the preview area to the handle and the body. And I'm using alpha because it's just easier to see. And as you can see, it doesn't apply everywhere. It applies from a certain angle, which is because object space is enabled. So I'm gonna disable this. As you can see, it's applied pretty much everywhere now at a pretty even rate. I'm gonna change the distribution to everywhere. And that's pretty much it. So I'm gonna apply it. And it's gonna save out so we can preview it. And as you can see, the bump is way too high and it adds color information, which is not what I want. So I'm gonna disable refresh and I'm gonna reduce these to around 2% because I want these to be really subtle color information wise. So I'm gonna go into height, preview the height map. As you can see, we have some pretty intense bump information here. So I'm gonna reduce this to, let's see, 25% to make it a lot more subtle. And with these changes, I'm gonna preview. And there we go, that's a lot better. Really nice, subtle bumps. Looking looking really cool. I want to add one additional layer of this effect though, so I'm gonna find a detail that is called, let me see if I can find it. It's called worn surface. It's a really cool detail. Almost look like wrinkled paper, like really wrinkled paper. And I'm gonna apply it everywhere. And it's gonna preview, which is gonna look pretty weird because we have too much color information there and too much bump, as you can see here. So once again, I'm gonna drag this down to around 2%. Which will pretty much leave us with only bump information, which again is a bit too intense. I'm gonna go into height map. I'm gonna drag this down to 30%. Let's wait for it to preview. There we go. Looking really cool. I'm actually gonna increase the opacity in just the diffuse channel to 20% to start with, and change the color to like dark red. Something like this, and increase the opacity to 35%. Change the color a bit. Just want a really subtle effect. It's looking really cool. And refresh. There we go. Starting to look really cool. Alright, so for this, the painted metal, I want this to look extra sun bleached and make it look really old and stuff. So I'm gonna add an additional miscoloration. Click that and apply it. There we go. I'm gonna disable refresh so we can work faster, make more changes before we save out the maps. I'm gonna toggle it on and off and see what it does. Change the color. So as you can see, it has some really subtle color variations, which I really like. Pretty saturated color, maybe a bit more red. Reduce it to around 65% instead. And also remove the height value completely. And refresh. There we go. I'm gonna make the previewer a bit bigger. Really awesome. Now I also want some mechanical leakage and so on. So I'm gonna remove the search query and add acid large. I want to preview this. Change the crop size. To this area. Change it to on map. And I want it to be a bit bigger, so I'm going to change the scale. Add some anti-aliasing. And apply it. There we go. It's a bit too extreme now, but it really added a cool layer of detail. I'm gonna change the color a bit to just move this out of the way. something like this, and reduce the opacity to around 35, maybe 45. Alright, so let's preview this after we drag the bump down a bit to 50%. There we go. Right, so when I add another layer of detail to this painted metal, because it looks really static and there's not a lot going on in the large areas. So I'm gonna go into the detail browser. Just move this out of the way. There we go. So I'm gonna find a detail that is called smear. As you can see, it adds like lumpy, big blotches of like almost like crumple up paint or something, which is looking really cool if you ask me. I'm gonna apply this, and as you're gonna see in the previewer, it's gonna be a bit too extreme to start off with. There we go. That's a bit, the color of it is really off, so I'm gonna change it by clicking the swatch here. I wanna make it almost the same color as the red below it. Just a little bit darker, just like this. I also want to reduce the height information to around 40% and preview. There we go. Some slight variations in there. And it still looks a bit too clean if you ask me. I want to add some scratches to it. So I'm gonna see here if I can find their mechanical scratches. I'm gonna see what it looks like with crosshatches. Preview it. Change the crop size to this area here. So we're getting some really small subtle scratches, which I really like. So I'm gonna apply them. And I can see the height information is way too extreme. I'm gonna lower this. And I'm also gonna decrease these values to around 75%. And remember, by shift clicking and dragging, you can change all these values together. So I'm gonna preview this and see what it looks like. Really cool. I'm gonna change the color because I'm noticing it's a bit too saturated. Something like this. Be fine for now. Maybe a bit like so. There we go. That's awesome. All right, so let's move on to the next piece that's just stinging my eyes, and it's the grill on the top here. So I'm gonna click this on the color map, and I'm gonna use the quick reflectance drop down. which is a really simple way for you to quickly prototype and try out different ideas. So I'm gonna change this to, let's see, steel. See what this looks like. It's already looking a lot better, but it's way too shiny and it's too dark. I want it to be a bit more plasticky. So I'm gonna make this look a bit beige in the diffuse. I'm gonna reduce the glossiness quite a bit. And decrease the specular to around 50%. There we go. Remove the post-processing to avoid the blur and bloom. It's already starting to look really cool, if you ask me. Got some pretty nice material separation. The chrome on the handlebar here is looking a bit too shiny. So I'm gonna change this, make this a bit brighter in the diffuse. Reduce the specularity with just a notch. And reduce the glossiness a bit. That's a lot better. Right, so I really like how it turned out with the mechanical leakage, the acid. So I'm gonna go into environmental, make a new group, call it mechanical, and add a detail. I'm gonna show all and choose the regular acid. And try the acid large. Nope, acid. And I'm gonna apply it, disable auto refresh. Because I want this detail to be applied on every single surface. And it's a bit too extreme at the moment, so I'm gonna drag it down to around 25. So as you can see, it just added a very subtle effect everywhere. Even on the grill up here. Just very subtle. I'm gonna remove the height information almost all the way to around 25%. And the last detail for now that I want to add is just a generic edge highlight. So I'm gonna make an additional group. Name it edge highlight. Add detail. And I'm gonna find it here in the list, and it's called plain edge. I'm gonna increase the scale. That's perfect. Gonna add it. And as you can see, it's too extreme at the moment. So once again, I'm gonna drag it down. I'm gonna try 50%. A bit too much still, 40. And remove the height information completely. And I want this to be applied. No, it's actually fine as it is. It's looking really cool. Might be a bit too extreme though. I'm gonna try 30%. There we go. And preview. There we go. sludge detail we added to add some irregularities to the painted metal. Since I changed the color of the base painted metal, this one is slightly off, so I'm gonna go back here and change it. The smear effect, sorry, not sludge. Make it a bit darker. There we go. It's much better. Alright, so I'm gonna continue tweaking this, and I'll see you soon. Now it's time to look into the custom detail creator. We'll go over how to access the module, how it works, and an example of creating a detail. Alright, so I want to add a detail that doesn't actually exist in the detail library, and it's a detail that is going to emulate the paint being kind of scratched off, mainly on protruding areas. So to create that detail, I'm going to go into the custom detail creator, found under modules and custom detail creator. So once you open it, you're going to notice that it has two sides. One side that says drop filters here, and one side that has a huge library of different filters and effects and so on. And at the bottom here, you see the controls that you can find in the detail browser. And the way that the custom detail creator works is that you basically just drag an effect or a filter to the left side, and dDo reads those filters from bottom to top. So the ones at the top is going to be read last. So keep this in mind when you work, because depending on where they are in the stack, you're going to get really different results. So make sure you play around with this and place them in different places and so on to see what kind of results you get. And if you're familiar with Photoshop and its filters, you're going to be able to pick this up pretty quickly, because it's a really basic workflow. And in the end, it's all about basically analyzing what the different filters do and which sliders they have, and play around with the blending modes. So I'm gonna start off now creating this detail. So the first thing I'm adding is a brightness contrast node. This will allow me to decide how bright and, well, how contrasty the mask is gonna be. And seeing as I want this detail to be really wide and affect large areas, I'm adding a Gaussian blur, which will allow me to blur the mask. Next, I'm adding another brightness contrast node so that I further can control the brightness and contrast of the mask. And seeing as this is going to be a wear and tear detail, I think it's really important to specify where on the model it's going to be. So I'm using an occlusion node, which allows me to mask out the areas that aren't really sticking out very much. Now I'm adding a crystallized node, which allows me to sort of simulate how peeled or worn paint would look like chips falling off. I'm adding a spatter node to further increase the amount of fidelity in the mask. Next, I'm adding a mesotint node, and I'm setting it to a soft light blending mode to blend it better with the mask, and to avoid it being just too evenly spaced across the entire mask, I'm changing it to coarse dots. I'm adding an additional mesotint node and setting it to color dodge. And I'm also using the long strokes mode to make it look like it's been kind of scratched along a certain direction. And the reason why I'm adding a crosshatch node is to make all the details kind of blend together a lot more. It's a really cool node for that purpose. And the last node I'm adding is a brightness contrast node. And the reason why I'm adding this is because I want to be able to control the brightness and contrast of the final mask. And now I'm going to check some of these boxes, which allows me to change the parameters of the checked values here whenever I browse for the detail in the detail browser. As you can see, this list here fills up as I add details, as I check the parameters. One thing worth noting is that almost all the details you can find in dDo, they can all be recreated using the custom detail creator. So it's a really powerful tool and it's definitely worth looking into. Right, so as soon as you're ready to apply the detail, you just press D, the D button here, and it will prompt you about where you want to save it. So I'm gonna save it as worn of paint. And it's going to be applied in the detail group that you have currently selected. Change the color of it. Make it a bit darker. Go into the specular, boost it up here, make it a bit brighter, so it looks like the metal is shining through. Same thing with the gloss, except I'm gonna drag it down and increase the value. And in the height, I want it to slightly go inwards. I'm gonna make it a darker color. There we go. I want to preview it. Just gonna load the mesh again, since I closed the previewer down. There we go. There we go. Very subtle, but really useful detail. Very, very subtle. And you can always go in and apply it once more with different settings and see if you can get different results. So I'm gonna try and do that. Go to custom. Worn off paint, preview it, change the preview area down here. All right, make this a bit bigger so I can see what I'm doing. There we go. Decrease the height a bit. There we go. And decrease it here as well. There we go. Very nice subtle detail. Alright, so it's time to scale up the project to full size for the presentation. In this last part, we'll go over production editing, and we'll look into production rendering, hand-painted decals, and saving your textures. Alright, so in order to scale up the entire project to the 4K resolution in which we baked, all we need to do is go to File, and select New Production Render. This is gonna upscale everything to a 4K resolution, or to the resolution of the input maps you put in the automation hub. So I'm gonna press this, and I'll see you when I'm done. Right, so there we go. So what happened now was that dDo just generated the project once again, and it saved a new PSD, so you still have your old low-res PSD if you want to use it. So as you can see now, we have a really high resolution crisp texture. I'm going to load the mesh, and there we go. As you can see, we have a really crisp and nice texture now. Some details may need to be altered or applied once again due to the scale differences. So I'm gonna boost the height of the painted metal base definition to make it pop a bit more. To around 45. There we go. And let's increase the opacity of this one as well to around 50%. Just make it pop a bit more. And there we go. It's really cool. Okay, so we're almost done. I'm just gonna import a couple of decals that I created for this. So I'll see you in a second. Alright, so I pasted the decals into the document. As you can see here, the Remington logos here and there, and a little sticker down here. So I'm going to move those out of the group that they're currently in. There we go. Just gonna drag it up here, just beneath the AO and cavity of the diffuse. And let's refresh. And there we go. But I want to be able to control the reflectance values of these stickers. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to convert these decals to a detail. So I'm going to move them out of the group, decal group, just like so. I can delete the group. And at first of all, I'm going to select, let's see here. I'll do one at a time. This one here. So with that layer selected, I'm gonna go into Edit and Detail from Current Layer. So now I'm going to be able to control the reflectance values in the diffuse, gloss, specular, just like all other details. Right, so I'm going to repeat this process for all the other decals as well, and I'll see you in a second. And there we go. So now I'm able to control the reflectance values for all of these decals, both in the diffuse, specular, gloss, and height. But the problem is I lost information in the diffuse, so I'm going to import the decals once again and just stick it on top. So I'll get back as soon as I've done that. And there we go. So I just did the same thing again. I just pasted the decals, this group here, and it's on top of the details that I just created from the decals. So as you can see here, it's got a flat color in the specular, gloss, and height. But I do have all the decals with details in the diffuse. So if we refresh, so now these stickers are way more believable since they don't have all the lumpy height information below them or coming through them. So I'm going to be changing the reflectance values using the sliders, just like you can do with every other detail. So let's start with the first one and increase the specular level. And there we go. Right, so let's preview it. Right, so there we go. Let's hide the floor. Increase the opacities, increase the light. And there we go. Also got a slight bump to it to make it look like it's actually got some thickness to it, like a real sticker. Remove the post process. Looking really cool. Alright, so let's say you want to save this out and use it in an engine of your choice. The only thing you need to do is go into Maps. And as you can see here, there are sliders up here for the ambient occlusion and the cavity for the diffuse and specular. Beneath that you can see two buttons, export all and export checked. Export all exports all the maps, and export checked exports only the checked maps, which you can check here. Beneath that you can specify which path you want to export them to. So I'm gonna export mine to desktop. And for each of these maps, you can set the extension or a suffix, D for diffuse, S for specular, or you can enter diff, for example. I'm going to leave it at the default D. You can also set the file type and the scale. Beneath that you have an option asking if you want to apply this very subtle sharpen filter, if you want it to be grayscale, or if you want to save it in another map's RGB channel, which can come in real handy. So I want to export my diffuse, specular, gloss, and normal. And I want to export my gloss as in the alpha channel of the specular. So I've checked as A for alpha of specular, which is this map here. And this one has sharpen enabled, and so does this. So they're all gonna be sharpened. On normal, you have another option here, or two different options. One is flip Y, which allows you to swizzle the green channel, which a couple of engines and programs need. Next, you can change the intensity of the bump from the height map. I'm gonna leave mine at, I'm gonna set mine to 35. And once you're happy with your settings, all you need to do is press export checked. Right, so if you continue working afterwards and you want to save it again, you don't have to go back to the Maps tab. All you need to do is press this button here, which is Quick Export, and it's gonna export the checked maps only. So it's a really nice time saver, and that's it. After saving the textures, they can be used in the engine of your choice, and the presets you created can be applied to any project you want in the future, meaning that every hour spent is an hour earned. We've gone over baking, color map creation, detailing with dDo 2, creating a texture from scratch to finish in dDo, and we've saved out the textures, all in just 2 hours. I really hope you learned something, and thank you very much for watching. See you next time.